My fiancée convinced me to pay for our dream wedding, then she vanished with the money and a new identity. I always considered myself a logical person, the kind who double-checks contracts and thinks twice before making big financial decisions. But when it came to my marriage, I let my guard down. I, 32M, met my wife, Claire, 29F, 3 years ago, and everything about her felt like a dream. She was smart, charming, and had this effortless way of making me believe that we were building something real together. We moved in after a year, and when I proposed, she seemed over the moon. The way she clutched her chest and teared up, you'd think I had just handed her the key to heaven itself. From the very beginning, Claire had this vision for our wedding. She wanted something grand, not just a celebration, but an experience. It's the most important day of our lives, she told me more times than I can count. I wasn't against it. I had always imagined a nice wedding, something elegant but reasonable. But she wanted the full production, a historic venue, designer decorations, a custom menu with a private chef, and a live band that apparently played for celebrities. It wasn't cheap. I had savings, but this would eat up a significant chunk of it. Still, she convinced me, saying she would handle all the arrangements. I trusted her. I wanted to trust her. The planning moved fast. Claire was constantly in touch with vendors, sending me updates about deposits and bookings. She even created this elaborate wedding binder, full of inspiration pictures, spreadsheets, and color-coded budgets. Whenever I hesitated about the cost, she reassured me. "This is an investment in us," she said. "People will remember this day forever." And I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe I was giving my future wife the wedding she had always dreamed of. So, I transferred the money. Nearly $45,000, a mix of my savings and a small loan to cover everything up front. She told me she would take care of the rest. Then, a week later, she disappeared. At first, I didn't panic. Claire had mentioned she was visiting her mom for a few days, so when I woke up to an empty house, I assumed that's where she was. But then the first red flag appeared, her phone went straight to voicemail. No texts, no calls. I figured she was just busy. But as the hours stretched into days, I started to feel that gnawing sensation in my gut, the one that tells you something is very wrong. I called her mom, expecting to hear that Claire was there, maybe just overwhelmed with the stress of wedding planning. But her mom sounded confused. She hadn't seen Claire in weeks. That was when the panic set in. I checked our shared accounts, cleared out. The wedding planner? Said she hadn't heard from Claire since the first consultation. The venue? Never received a booking. Every single vendor she had confirmed to me had never actually been paid. She had taken everything and vanished. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. One moment, I was planning my wedding, the next, I was staring at a financial black hole and a fiancé who no longer existed. I went through every possible explanation in my head. Maybe she was in trouble. Maybe she had been kidnapped. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had been scammed by the person I loved most. I started digging. I reached out to her friends, her co-workers, anyone who might have a clue. But it was as if she had never existed. No one knew where she was. Then I checked our apartment. Her closet? Half empty. Suitcases? Gone. Even the little things, her favorite perfume, her laptop, the bracelet I bought her on our first anniversary, vanished. That was the moment it hit me, she had planned this. Every word, every tear, every kiss, it had all been a setup. I sat there, staring at the empty space in our closet, feeling like a complete idiot. I retraced every step of our relationship, every moment that now felt like a lie. Had she ever actually loved me? Or was I just a walking ATM to her? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Claire never intended to marry me. She played the long game, building trust, making me believe she wanted this life with me, only to walk away with everything when the time was right. I went to the police, hoping they could do something, anything. But since I had willingly transferred the money, it was a civil matter. They told me to get a lawyer, file a fraud claim, but deep down, I already knew I wasn't getting that money back. It was gone. Claire was gone. And I was left with a pile of wedding invitations for a ceremony that never existed. The worst part wasn't even the money, it was the humiliation. I had to tell my family, my friends, everyone who had been excited for the wedding, that there wasn't going to be one. At first, I sugarcoated it, saying we had postponed things. But eventually, the truth came out. Some people were sympathetic, others, not so much. A few even implied I should have seen the signs. That stung. Was I really that blind? Looking back, there were small things: how she never wanted me involved in planning, how she always pushed for more expensive options, how she got weirdly defensive when I asked about receipts. But at the time, I had written it off as normal wedding stress. I spiraled for a while. How do you even process something like this? One day, you're planning your future, and the next, you're some guy people whisper about behind your back. I became obsessed with trying to track her down, but every lead was a dead end. She had deleted her social media, changed her number, and even her email bounced back. It was like she had been erased. Eventually, I had no choice but to accept it. Claire was gone, and chasing her wouldn't change that. But the damage she left behind? That was mine to deal with. The financial hole she put me in was brutal. I had drained my savings and taken out a loan for a wedding that never existed. And now, I was stuck paying off a debt for a life she never intended to share with me. The worst part? I still had to face the reality of canceling everything. Calling vendors to confirm what I already knew, hearing their awkward apologies, feeling the weight of every non-refundable deposit. It was like reliving the betrayal over and over again. I thought about taking legal action, but what could I even prove? She didn't steal the money. I gave it to her under the assumption that it would be used for our wedding. There was no paper trail of deceit, no written confession of her intentions. Just my word against a ghost. A lawyer told me my chances of recovering anything were slim. Unless she resurfaced and I could prove outright fraud, I'd be better off focusing on moving forward. But how do you move forward when everything you built was a lie? For weeks, I felt like I was living in a fog. I couldn't focus at work, I avoided friends, and every time I saw a couple holding hands or heard someone mention a wedding, it felt like a gut punch. I wasn't just mourning Claire, I was mourning the version of my future that I had believed in. And the worst part? She was probably out there, spending my money, moving on like I never existed. But then something changed. One night, I was doom scrolling through social media, half expecting to stumble upon some clue of where she had gone. And then, I found it. A random tagged photo from someone I didn't even know. Claire, sitting at a beachside resort, drink in hand, looking like she didn't have a care in the world. My heart pounded. She had been so careful to erase herself, but this? This was a mistake. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than misery. I felt anger. That picture ignited something in me. I wasn't just some heartbroken idiot she could disappear on. I deserved justice. I zoomed in on the photo, trying to identify details. The caption didn't say much, just some generic paradise vibes nonsense, but the location tag? Bali. Claire had run off to Bali with my money. I didn't waste time. I gathered every screenshot, every bank statement, every shred of proof I had and went straight to a lawyer. If I couldn't get my money back through traditional means, I wanted to explore every legal angle. Fraud, misrepresentation, something. And while I was at it, I posted that same picture in a private Facebook group for people who had been scammed by partners. Within hours, people were commenting, sharing similar stories. Someone even recognized Claire. Apparently, she had pulled a similar stunt years ago under a different name. That was the final piece I needed. Claire wasn't just a runaway bride, she was a serial scammer. And now, I had proof. With the help of some people from the Facebook group, I tracked down more details about her past. She had pulled variations of this same scheme before, always targeting men with stable finances, always vanishing right before the wedding. Different cities, different names, but the same pattern. Armed with this information, my lawyer helped me file a case against her, this time with actual evidence of a repeated scam. It wasn't just a civil matter anymore, this was fraud. And while the process was slow, word started to spread. A few people even messaged me, claiming they had also been involved with her at some point. One guy had been engaged to her 5 years ago, and she disappeared with his money too. That was when I knew I wasn't just seeking justice for myself. I was exposing someone who had built a life out of destroying others. It took months, but eventually, my case gained traction. The evidence of her past scams, the testimonies from other victims, and the financial trail she left behind all painted a clear picture. Claire wasn't just some runaway fiancée, she was a professional con artist. With enough pressure, authorities finally took notice. A fraud investigation was opened, and the more they dug, the worse it got. Claire had used multiple fake identities, defrauded people in several states, and even had outstanding warrants under a different alias. Then, one day, I got the news I had been waiting for. She had been arrested at an airport while trying to leave the country again, this time using yet another fake name. The feeling of relief was overwhelming. This wasn't just about getting my money back anymore, it was about making sure she couldn't do this to anyone else. And as I sat there, reading the official statement about her arrest, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Closure. Claire's arrest made headlines, nothing major, but enough for people to take notice. A few news articles described her as a wedding scammer and detailed how she had targeted multiple men over the years. I saw comments from strangers debating whether I had been foolish or just unlucky, but I didn't care. What mattered was that she was finally facing consequences. Legally, it was a slow process, but with enough pressure from her past victims, she was formally charged with fraud and identity theft. My lawyer told me that even if I never saw a dime of my money again, at least I had stopped her from doing this to someone else. And that was enough for me. I had spent so long feeling humiliated, replaying every mistake in my head, but in the end, I wasn't the fool. She was. She could have had a real life, real love, real security, but instead, she chose to lie and steal. And now, she was paying for it. With Claire behind bars, I finally started to rebuild my life. The debt was still there, but I was working through it. More importantly, I was done feeling like a victim. I had spent months blaming myself, wondering if I had been too trusting, too naive. But the truth was, she had played me because she knew how to manipulate people. And I wasn't the only one. That realization helped me let go of the shame. Looking back, I don't regret exposing her. If anything, I wish I had caught on sooner. But in the end, I got the justice I deserved. Claire's sentencing is still pending, and while I doubt she'll spend years in prison, at least she's no longer free to move on to her next victim. As for me, I've learned my lesson. Next time, love won't blind me to the red flags. And there will be a next time, because I refuse to let her be the reason I stop believing in people. So, was I wrong for going after her? Should I have just moved on, or did I do the right thing by making sure she faced the consequences? Comment 1. I don't even know what to say except good for you for going after justice. Some people might say you should have just moved on, but how? This woman literally built a life scamming people, and if you hadn't exposed her, who knows how many more victims she would have had? You didn't just do the right thing, you shut down her entire operation. And honestly, don't blame yourself for trusting her. It's so easy for people on the outside to say, "Oh, I would have seen the red flags," but no one goes into a relationship expecting to be conned. You believed in love, in commitment, and that doesn't make you stupid, it makes you human. The mistake wasn't yours, it was hers. I really hope you're able to recover from the financial loss, but more than that, I hope you can move forward without carrying the weight of this betrayal. Because at the end of the day, you won. Claire might have stolen your money, but you ended her game for good. And that? That's priceless. Comment 2. This is the kind of story that makes you question everything about people. The way she played the long game, built trust, and then vanished with your money, it's straight up sociopathic. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a full-blown heist. And if you hadn't exposed her, she'd still be out there, ruining more lives without a second thought. You did exactly what needed to be done. Some people might say it's just money and you should have moved on, but it's not just money. It's your trust, your future, and your dignity. She didn't just steal your savings, she tried to make you feel like an idiot for believing in her. But the joke's on her, because now she's finally facing the consequences of her actions. I hope you know you came out of this stronger. Yeah, it's going to take time to rebuild, but at the end of the day, she lost. She lost her freedom, her anonymity, and her ability to con anyone else. And you? You got the last laugh. The follow-up: first, I just want to say thank you for all the comments and support. Reading your responses really helped me see things from a different perspective. For a long time, I felt like an idiot, like I had somehow let this happen to me. But hearing from all of you reminded me that this wasn't my fault. Claire was a predator, and I was just her latest target. And now, I've got an update that I never expected. After Claire's arrest, I thought that would be the end of it. I assumed she'd fight the charges, maybe even manage to weasel her way out with some slick lawyer. But I underestimated just how deep her lies ran. Once the investigation picked up, more victims started coming forward, men from different cities, even different countries, all with eerily similar stories. Some had been engaged to her. Others had been in long-term relationships, only to wake up one day and find their bank accounts drained and their girlfriend gone without a trace. One guy reached out to me personally after reading about her arrest online. He told me he had married her 5 years ago, only for her to disappear on their honeymoon, taking his entire life savings with her. And here's the craziest part: she had used a completely different name with him. A different background, a different life story. This wasn't just someone who scammed for survival. This was someone who lived for the con, who changed identities like outfits and left nothing but destruction in her wake. Hearing all of this made my blood run cold. It was one thing to know that Claire had scammed me, but realizing that I was just one of many? That hit differently. It meant every laugh, every kiss, every moment we shared had been nothing more than part of her act. It wasn't just about money. She enjoyed deceiving people, playing the role of the perfect partner until it was time to vanish. The more I learned, the worse it got. The authorities managed to dig up bank records, fake IDs, and even old social media accounts she had scrubbed clean. One detective told me she had at least 6 known aliases, and that was just what they had uncovered so far. She had been running this game for almost a decade. Different names, different victims, same pattern. And the kicker? In a few cases, she hadn't even left with money. Sometimes, she just disappeared for the thrill of it. At this point, it wasn't just about getting justice for myself, it was about making sure no one else ever went through this again. The prosecutors were building a solid case against her, and with all the new victims coming forward, the charges kept piling up. What started as a fraud case was now turning into something much bigger. Identity theft, wire fraud, even conspiracy. Claire had left a trail of destruction that was finally catching up to her. Then, something happened that I never expected. I got a call from a private investigator. One of the other victims had hired him years ago to track Claire down, but she had always managed to slip away. Now, with her finally behind bars, he was digging deeper into her past. And what he found? It was unreal. Claire hadn't just been lying about who she was, she had an entire life before all of this. A real name, a real family, and a past that she had buried so deep that no one would have ever connected the dots. The investigator sent me files, old records, missing person reports, and even faded childhood photos. And that's when I saw it: Claire, or whatever her real name was, as a teenager. She looked different, softer, younger, with none of the sharp-edged confidence I had known. According to the report, she had vanished nearly 15 years ago, cutting ties with her real family and disappearing off the grid. Her real name was Hannah Whitmore, and she wasn't just a scammer, she was a runaway. At 16, she had left home and never looked back. No one knew why. There were no reports of abuse, no history of trouble. Just one day, she was there, and the next, she wasn't. And in the years that followed, she became Claire, then Samantha, then Emily, a new identity for every new life she built and burned to the ground. Finding out Hannah, had been living under false identities for over a decade made everything feel even more surreal. I had spent so much time thinking she was just a heartless con artist, but now I couldn't help but wonder what had made her this way. What could have driven a 16-year-old girl to disappear and become someone else, over and over again? The investigator told me that her parents had spent years searching for her. They had reported her missing, hired private detectives, even appeared on local news stations begging for information. But at some point, she simply ceased to exist in the system. No bank accounts, no official records, nothing. It was like she had been erased. But that wasn't the strangest part. When the investigator reached out to her parents to inform them she had been found, their reaction was unexpected. Instead of relief or gratitude, her parents' response was cold. Almost detached. They didn't ask where she was or if she was okay. They didn't even seem surprised. The investigator told me that when he broke the news, her father simply sighed and said, "So she finally got caught." Her mother didn't say a word, just hung up the phone. That reaction shook me. It was the first time I questioned if maybe she had been running from something bigger than just the law. But at the same time, did that excuse everything she had done? All the people she had hurt, the lives she had wrecked? I didn't know what to think anymore. For months, I had seen her as nothing but a monster. But now, there was this small, nagging thought in my mind: what if she had once been a victim, too? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, but at the same time, I had to remind myself she wasn't my problem anymore. Claire, Hannah, whatever her real name was, had chosen this path. She had built her life on deception, on hurting people, and now she was finally facing the consequences. But still, I found myself digging. I went back to the investigator, asking if he could find anything more about her past. And he did. Old school records, hospital visits, even a juvenile arrest that had been expunged. But the most telling thing? A restraining order filed by her own parents when she was just 17. That was when it all clicked. Claire, Hannah, hadn't just run away. She had been thrown away. The restraining order hit me like a brick. I had been so focused on how she had betrayed me that I never once considered that she had been betrayed first. The details were vague, just legal jargon about domestic disturbances and a history of behavioral issues. But it was enough to tell me that something had happened. Something bad enough that her own parents wanted her legally barred from coming back. I sat with that information for a long time. It didn't change what she had done to me. It didn't erase the lies, the stolen money, or the fact that she had ruined so many lives without a second thought. But for the first time, I wondered, had she ever stood a chance at being anything else? Or had she been running from the moment she was old enough to escape? Even worse, I realized something else: Claire, or Hannah, or whatever name she had been using, had probably never expected to get caught. But now that she had, where would she run to? That thought stuck with me. Where would she run to now? For years, she had lived in the shadows, slipping through cracks, rebuilding herself under new names and new lies. But prison wasn't something she could talk her way out of. For the first time in who knows how long, she had no escape plan. No safety net. A part of me wanted to feel satisfied. She had played the game and lost. But another part, one I wasn't proud of, felt something else. Pity? No, that wasn't quite right. More like unease. Like I had finally seen behind the mask and found something emptier than I expected. She had spent her entire life running, and now that the walls had closed in, she had nothing left. Then, just when I thought I had put it all behind me, I got a letter. From her. The letter arrived without warning, just an unmarked envelope slipped into my mailbox. My heart pounded as I opened it, half expecting it to be some last-ditch attempt to manipulate me, some excuse or twisted justification for what she had done. But what I read, it wasn't what I expected at all. It was short. Barely a page. No apologies, no explanations, just a simple acknowledgement of the situation. I guess this is it. That's how she started. No denial, no theatrics. Just the words of someone who had finally run out of roads to escape down. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg for sympathy. The only thing that stuck with me was one single line: I thought I was smarter than this. I thought I could always stay ahead. That was it. No signing off, no plea for help, nothing. Just the cold realization of someone who had finally lost control. I must have read that line a dozen times. I thought I could always stay ahead. It was strange, after everything she had done, after all the deception and destruction she left behind, this was the first time she actually sounded real. No manipulation, no fake charm, no performance. Just a woman who had finally run out of moves to play. I didn't know what to do with the letter. A part of me wanted to rip it up, to toss it in the trash and be done with her forever. But another part of me, one I hated to admit, felt something close to closure. For months, I had thought of her as this untouchable force, a ghost who had danced through life, hurting people without consequence. But now, she was just a person. A deeply broken, deeply lost person. I never wrote back. I never visited her. And I never tried to find out what happened next. Because, for the first time since this nightmare started, I was finally free.